what happens is you go, 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 and you're trying to adapt to so much that it seems like every day is Groundhog Day. It sort of comes back again and is repeated. And there's not so much to differentiate from the weekend. You're not going to take a trip on the weekend, or you're not going to take, oh, I'm going to see this friend this other time. So what happens is the mind all of a sudden doesn't know when it's going to get a break. So I don't know if you've ever been hungry, right? When you're really, really hungry, and then, but you know that you're going to eat in an hour and a half. Your mind is, it's unpleasant, but it's okay. It's just unpleasant. Now think about being super hungry and having no idea when the break comes. What does your mind do?
Panic.
Panic, right? So this is a bit where we are at. Our minds are panicking because they don't know when they're going to get a break. So we actually have to invite them to consider breaks during the week, whatever those might mean. And small things, give a cadence, a rhythm to your week. That could be breakfast for dinner, game night, seeing a special friend, waking up early in the morning and having some alone time. Sometimes I think about have a picnic in the moonlight. I mean, anything that feels sort of off the ordinary and interesting, that doesn't require traveling or doesn't require massive amounts of, financial input.
Yeah.
But something to give your mind something to rest on. Otherwise, your mind will give you much more anxiousness. Again, it's designed to do that. So it's not that you're doing it because there's something wrong with you. Our minds are going to be our minds throughout the pandemic, just like they will be our minds throughout it. It's just they don't have those naturally well-honed resting places that you've always had.
Interesting. Okay.
This is the next one is the one that I feel most people are going to say, what are you talking about? And yet I think if it is anything that folks remember, this is probably the one to remember, is to peek at the future, look at the future, but stay very much rooted in the present. So I always feel like I'm going to list, okay, I'm peeking at the future, I'm looking at sort of what's coming, but I'm staying in the present. And why? Because there's so much uncertainty, and our minds are going to design to scan the unknown for problems. So what's going to do naturally, it's going to look for worst case scenarios and then trying to solve them. Now, as you know, you really can solve problems that are not present, some of them. Sometimes you can, and you want to be preventive, of course, and thoughtful, but most of the time you can solve problems that are not here, and you can solve problems that may never come to pass. That's really hard to do. You can't fix what's not broken. So you do want to stay informed. You want to look at the future, but be careful about the mind getting so much ahead of you that it's just going to be in full catastrophizing mode and in full prep mode for the catastrophe. So look up, look at the future and see realistically what are some of the things you want to be cognizant about. And the moment you see you're rising to massive amounts of speculation, then there's really no way of knowing or no real solution, then come back to the present. And then people usually ask me, so how much in the future, how much in the present should I stay?
Right.
And I say, let your anxiety ride it. So as your anxiety rises, look more closely to home. As your anxiety is fine, you can look more ahead. Sometimes it means looking some weeks ahead, and sometimes it means some minutes ahead. Really, you let your anxiety guide you.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I know that that's been part of the ongoing, some of the more positive conversations I've had or seen on social media in particular, or on Zoom meetings around self-care, is about trying to stay present, and just not getting so far down the road about what the next 18 months is going to look like, or, what if I don't get employed again, or like, just, there are so many more things, it feels like, to get into our heads about, that are anxiety inducing, that are just sort of, especially in a situation where we already feel like we're anxious, it just amps it up. So I love that. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about, it's a little bit more subtle than just stay present, right? Because I think that is sometimes hard for people to swallow. Like, what does that mean? And I have to consider, like, when am I going to go to the grocery store? And, and that can be anxiety inducing right now. So I like how you kind of teased that out a little bit and talked about, really paying attention to at what point our anxiety starts to increase and it gets really uncomfortable, and to sort of try to walk back a little bit. So planning is okay, but trying to stay out of the sort of dramatic, catastrophizing.
Mm-hmm. And even I always say, the when we panic, our ability to think and to imagine creative solutions actually goes down. Our system was meant to just, the panic system
Huh.
that we have was meant to face fear and run. It wasn't meant to think through things, you know?
Wow. Huh.
So for now, partly is if a disaster is to come, you actually want to save your energy and your creativity to be able to face it. If you consume all your energy, you narrow your creativity because you go into panic zone, it's not going to help you for the disaster either. So I'm not denying that there could be something that for some of us or for many of us, it's going to be difficult to face, and it's still worth it keeping your anxiety down, which means you have to regulate it by staying more in the present. So that's why it's helpful. And I think the other way that our mind can terrorize us is by fearing that we're not going to be able to handle it. So one of the key things for us to realize is our mind is going to basically be our part of our alert system. Look, danger is coming. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? And that can really undermine our own sense of safety and our sense that we can do something to rise to the occasion. So there's only good things that are going to come from you trusting yourself that you're going to be able to rise to whatever the challenge that will come. Right, I will trust yourself that you will rise to it. So I always say to myself, whatever will be, because it's true. Literally, that's just the definition. Not because I'm not going to try to shape it, but ultimately, what will be, and I will rise to it. And it's something that I repeat for myself over and over again. And the other part of rising, it's that, especially in mainstream US, there's a lot of values around, I shall do it by myself. I'm going to carve my path. And I would say this is not a time to go it alone, because this is the time for, you'll know all those beautiful social capital that you build, your spiritual foundation of your life, and those resources that you accrued over the years. It's a time to use them all. It's a time to access them. So if we don't know that we are interconnected, interdependent, and walking a path together now, I'm not sure we're going to learn this lesson. So mobilize all your resources. This is not a time to go at it alone, and really give yourself what you need, which is also meaning giving yourself what you need and not what you want sometimes. I'm hearing a lot of indulging happening during the pandemic, and which is lovely and wonderful. And I think for some people, it really is that special event that we were talking about before. But there's not as much room to recover from those moments. And so you want to be careful how you indulge and how much you indulge, only because our usual ways of recovering from those moments may not be available. And then we're even more taxed. So this is not a need that our system then has to front and yourself from. But in that context, also important to say, when you're giving yourself what you need, you're not the only person that's going to give it to yourself. Ask your work for what you need. Ask your family, if you live with folks, or your roommates, what you need. Try to make it clear that you're leaning on each other and also trying to take care of each other in ways that don't burden each other.
That's awesome. That's great. And I love that you mentioned indulgence. That is also a theme that I hear over and over amongst friends and family about eating and online shopping and all these ways that I think we're trying to kind of discharge some of that anxiety, but then we end up beating up ourselves around it, because it doesn't actually really help us. It may in the moment, but the long-term implications are usually pretty lousy. We feel lousy the next day and have a sugar hangover, and so I think that's a super helpful thing to point out and talk a little bit about, to kind of, certainly for me to remind myself that, like, let's find some health, temper it, right?
That's right. That's right. No, when it's a real treat, that is the special moment that's going to be regenerating, and when it's going to be past that curve and diminish returns. So
right. The law of diminishing marginal utility.
Right. I guess the one last thing that I wanted to put out there, we talked so much about the loss and what we don't have control over, which really most of the impact of the pandemic and most of the first 7 tips really deal with all the losses and changes. But there is one thing that we can forget, that there's one thing that nothing and no one can take away from us. And in fact, is what makes our lives incredibly meaningful and fulfilling, and feeling with what makes our lives feel so meaningful and fulfilling. And that's our values. So if you can center your life and your daily activities around mentally and intentionally around your priorities and your values, and by priorities I mean your values really, you're going to change the way your days feel. And so by your values, like kindness, for example, I don't mean a goal. I don't mean, okay, I will call my friend who maybe lives by themselves, making sure they're okay. That's a goal and it's wonderful. But values like kindness are open-ended. There's a way in which they orient you in life. They're never finished. And there's something that you aspire to constantly because it's intrinsically meaningful. And so I would say that pick the values, recenter your life around the values that are meaningful to you: kindness, community, family, patience, giving, whatever it is. And then make your days centered and revolve around it. So for example, for me, part of doing these emotional fitness programs and writing the blog is a way of sharing my values, supporting, being a support to others, and sharing the tools of my profession with others. And so that's a way of centering my days. And when I do this kinds of program, I feel like my day was very meaningful and very productive. And it's not that the rest of my so-called troubles are not there, but I am feeling that I'm still living fully in the process. And it's not just about the loss. It's not just about what I don't have control, but it's what I do have control. How I'm going to maximize this way of giving, which is brand new, and it wouldn't have happened without the pandemic.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that too. That's a great way to kind of give myself and for all of us to give ourselves a focus, a little bit of a focus, and remind ourselves on a daily basis of like, okay, especially since we don't have the distractions and the material world does, our physical and material existence right now looks so different, that putting your values first is, yeah, a great way to kind of engage in a lot of heart-centered work and healing, and finding a little bit of a different purpose than maybe what our lives looked like a few months ago. So that's awesome. That's great. I love that. So I know that we've kind of gone through most of your tips. Is there anything else that you think is important to share with people, to hear or reflect on, that we didn't touch on?
There could be an infinite amount of topics, but I would just reiterate, just be really as gentle and kind to yourself as you can. I think we are all a little bit on Mission Impossible. And so realize that when it's Mission Impossible, we're all going to fall a little bit short. So be kind with yourself, be kind with each other, and just let's do our best at each step. And let's make that the focus and not doing it perfectly.
Thank you. That's lovely. I so appreciate your thoughts, and I'm going to share with everybody in my posts with this your blog information, because I just think it's just a great thing to be able to read. I read a little bit each morning, some daily meditations, and it's nice to kind of be reminded of putting these ideas first in my life on a daily basis, so maybe other people will benefit as well from that. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate your time and your insight and your wisdom. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My pleasure.